you.
I must say that I'm honored to see each and every one of you. Now, you may not know that I didn't grow up in a big city like Washington, D.C., or Baltimore, or New York, or Atlanta. I grew up in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. I first came to this city when I had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter to go on the Freedom Ride. Just think, in 1961, not that many years ago, black people and white people couldn't be seated together on a Greyhound bus or Trailway bus leaving the nation's capital to travel through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court. But the signs that I saw then, they are gone, and they will not return. And so when people tell me nothing has changed, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes, and I will show you change. I would like to thank the Kaiser Family Foundation, the Center for Medicare Advocacy, and Judy Stein for all of your work, for all of your involvement. For several decades, the course of our country has been directed in large part by the question and challenge of health care. Like you, many of you are both a witness to the history of this great struggle. It is fundamentally a struggle about government and how we heal one another, how we serve one another, and it has marked the time. As I said earlier, my time began in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a place called Troy. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4. How many of you remember when you were 4? What happened to the rest of us? But in 1944, when I was 4 years old, my father had saved $300, and a man sold him 110 acres of land. My family still owned that land. In those days, the 40 and 50 acres, no one ever heard of preventive care. Very few people have heard of Medicare. The term didn't have any meaning, and even if it did exist, my family could not afford it. Medicine was just not an option for us. Our pre-existing condition was poverty. The only insurance I had ever heard was burial insurance. The insurance man would travel from farm to farm, promising a dignified burial. People would give him their nickels and dimes. We thought we were handling our responsibility in death, but it was a scam. This was a hard truth for many families across the country, but especially in the heart of the Deep South. We never thought about it, how to be healthy. We could only be prepared to die. We never had the luxury to prepare for life. As a young person, very young, I had the honor and the privilege to call Dr. King and Rosa Parks. my leaders, my friend. Dr. King dreamed of creating what he called the beloved community. The dream is of a society that is rooted in the discipline and the philosophy of love and nonviolence. Philosophy that rejects racism or discrimination and value the dignity and the worth of all human beings. The historic civil rights laws of the 1960s embodied these beliefs and made them real. When President Lyndon Johnson signed Medicare into law in 1965, another piece of the beloved community came into place. And where will we be today? Where will our nation be without Medicare? All of a sudden, entire neighborhoods of people, families could be treated at their local hospital. We were supported by African-American tax dollars, many of it, but they could not receive service. But with the passage of Medicare, service became available. Segregation was a shameful remnant of slavery. It was a constant source of humiliation and violence. But in our hospital, segregation cost people their very lives. When we were beaten and left bloody and unconscious on the Freedom Rides in 1961, there were certain hospitals that refused to admit us. But there was a little Catholic hospital in Montgomery, known as St. Jude, took us in. We should heed this history. We should remember it. Any effort to take away these protections will have the same consequence. If you had told me that one day I would be standing here as a member of Congress, one day I would get a chance to play a part in national health care reform, I would have said you were crazy. You're out of your mind. You don't know what you're talking about. But today, I must say, Senator Rockefeller, I'm honored to represent the 5th Congressional District of Georgia, and I am blessed to have witnessed some of the most powerful moments in our history. So when people tell me over and over again, nothing will change, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes, and I will show you change. In 2009 and 2010, the House of Representatives and the Senate were trying to find a way to address disparity in health care. Now, what does it mean? Every family at some point will experience injury or illness. No mother or father should have to lay awake at night worrying whether a child will recover, while also fearing the arrival of the bill. No parents should have to choose between food and medicine. No parents should have to choose between the mortgage and providing necessary medical treatment. This is why decent, quality health care must be available to every American. It does not matter whether you are rich or poor, old or young, black or white, Latino, Asian, or Native American. You see, I believe in my heart of hearts that quality, affordable health care is a right. It is a right. Many great policymakers have worked to realize the dream of creating. They have worked and continue to work the dream of creating what we in the civil rights movement called the beloved community. Think of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, and my dear friend, the late Senator Kennedy, Edward Kennedy, and my friend who is with us today, my brother, Senator Rockefeller. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for getting in the way. Thank you for what I call getting in good trouble, necessary trouble, to help change America and make our country better for all of our citizens. These individuals, like many of you here who have been working so hard, faced opposition, but you stayed the course. You kept your eyes on the prize. And more than ever before, we need to keep our eyes on the prize, not just for health care, but to save our country and save our democracy. If you fail to do it, who will do it? So get out there and push and pull and carry the message. That is why 10 years ago we did our part to contribute to their historic down payment. Time and time again, we were told that truly reforming health care would be close to impossible. There was too many interests, too much money, and too much of a risk. The country held its breath while we worked to begin the necessary changes. We worked around the clock. We asked ourselves, how do we increase access to improve health and outcome and spend less? We worked with experts who spent their entire career studying and developing legislative answers to many of these questions. Then finally, we had a bill. For those of us who believe that health care is a right, we felt the bill should have gone further. We felt we could have done more to ensure that everyone had access to the best care available. We anguished. Is this bill enough? Are we doing good work? We struggled. I remember that day on the Hill when a group of us, men, women, some very young people, and members of Congress, left the Cannon office building, walked downstairs, and we were marching. We were walking. We thought about the 13th Amendment, which freed our ancestors from slavery, was ratified in 1865. Almost 100 years later, we were still marching in the street, still fighting for equal rights, still fighting for health care. So I asked, and I kept asking. So I had to ask myself, what would this bill look like in 100 years? Let us move our cause far enough down the long road to justice. Some business leaders think about the next quarter or the next decade. As leaders of the nation, we had to consider the next century. This is what kept me up at night. I also remember my colleagues in Congress and on the Ways and Means Committee, those on the Health Committee. Through the meetings and the markups, I watched them become aware of our place in history. I watched them as they discovered their own resolve to do what was right, what was just, and what was long overdue. Then we scheduled the flow vote. That day, the streets outside were filled with people. They were not there to show support. They were angry. Some were scared. When the time came to walk to the Capitol to vote, some members thought we should go on the ground. I told them no. The people outside are our brothers and sisters, and we are fighting for them, for all of the people, and not just some. I locked on with my colleagues. I remember the light in the eyes of Congressman John Dingell of Michigan, the only member there who had also voted for Medicaid or Medicare decades earlier. I remember how Speaker Pelosi used the same gavel that was used on the House floor the day Medicare was passed. Together we linked arms and walked outside. As I cast my vote on the House floor, I thought of my family living on my parents' farm many years ago. I thought about what preventive care might have meant for us if only we had access to it. I thought of every family who had that same need today. Their lives are precious and sacred. These are the reasons why I proudly voted yes. We must never, ever stop standing up, speaking out. We must never, ever stop getting in the way or getting in trouble, necessary trouble. But I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, and great-grandparents, why this, why that, why those signs? They would say, boy, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. I got in trouble. And it's time for all of us to get in trouble again. Save our country. Save democracy. We have a right to know what is in the food we eat. We have a right to know what is in the air we breathe, what is in the water we drink. Never lose hope. Keep the faith. Keep your eyes on the prize. During the 60s, I got arrested a few times, 40 times. And since I've been in Congress, another 5 times. And I'm probably going to get arrested again for something. But my philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. You're never too young or too old to speak up, to speak out. We cannot afford to be silent. There are forces in America today that want to take us back, but we've come too far. We've made too much progress to go back. We want to go forward and save this little piece of real estate that we call Earth for generations yet unborn. Thank you, and may God bless you.